Andrew via WebEx. First order of business is to approve the minutes of the August 18th, 2020 meeting. I would entertain a motion. Motion by Vulcan, second by Peckham. Any discussion? All those in favor can signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? That passes unanimously. Moving on to item number 2, discussion and possible action on amending the specific implementation plan at 1404, 1406, and 1412 Grand Avenue, and 105, 107, and 111 Sturgeon Eddy Road to allow for 3 multiplex residential buildings in a planned unit development. I think maybe before we take a motion, we'll have a presentation on this. I don't know who wants to kick us off.
Yeah, I can go over the changes. Is anybody from the, do you guys want to go first, or do you want me to try to overview things?
Why don't you go first?
Okay. Okay, so, last month, as a reminder, the Plan Commission looked at the general development plan for this development, and based on the feedback received at that meeting, the applicants made a few changes for the specific implementation plan, which was in the packet. Some of the changes, just as on a high level, is they reduced the number of units from 29 to 25 on the main portion of the property, to bring the density down and to satisfy the normal parking ratio in the code. So the parking ratio is the number of spots per unit now meets our normal zoning ordinance code at 1.48 spaces per unit, with the additional 4 bicycle spaces that reduces the number of spaces needed by 1. Bringing the number of units down also brought the density down. And I think that's about all I wanted to highlight for the changes. The massing of the building changed too. So the 2 street-facing buildings, the 3-story section is now kind of only in the middle, and the end sections of it are two stories. They were reduced to 2 stories. So, and the porches were enlarged, I believe, since the last meeting as well. I think that about sums it up for the site plan changes. So if you want to add anything, feel free. Otherwise, we can take questions.
I don't have anything to add. You covered up pretty much everything we were talking about.
I have a question.
Sure. Do you want to approach the mic so we can hear you?
I have a question on the plan. A lot of talk's been on the website about the in and out driveway access. Are they going to put a fence along that house near the
On that Sturgeon
driveway, the
alley.
main driveway? Are they going to put a fence along that house that's going to be next to the driveway? Because you got to acknowledge that her house is right next to that driveway, and they need to put some kind of a solid fence there to keep noise and headlights off her house, because it's only like 4 or 5 feet from the driveway. And that's just tear her house value apart.
So are you suggesting that a fence would go in on
Right there,
that
yes.
side?
That needs to have a fence.
So that's outside. I mean, that would be on her property, I believe, not on the developer's property.
You could put it on the
so-
development side. The fence is what, 6 inches?
Well, okay, so
You need to protect her house, her property value. That's her right.
the property that is under the review for the zoning ends on the east side of the alley. So
So that the alley is city property?
yeah.
So I think you still need to get a fence up there. I mean, that's not fair for her. That's really, when you get that many cars going in and out all day long, all night long, it's right next to her house. She's had that easement with nothing there for decades.
Well, I guess if I could maybe say it another way. I mean, this alley is staying the same in this proposal. Well, we've talked a little bit about a second driveway here, but the current alley that's there would only be serving the units to the back, would actually be a reduction from what's there now.
So it's not going to service the whole complex.
That's been under discussion.
If you could somehow get it so it's just the back one, then that's normal for her, it's nothing new. But if you put everybody into that driveway, that's not fair for her. That's just wrong. And I don't know her, I have known nothing about her, I'm just saying common sense tells you that she needs to be watched, you need to take care of her.
Thank you. Oh, Mr. Peckham.
I stood in that driveway with a couple of the occupants for a while this afternoon, and I certainly see their concern. It's a four-generation family home, and I realize that sometimes we approve things and the people who live next door just have to kind of make some accommodations, but I think this is too much. And I did have if we could figure out, to help me understand anyway, next to the alley that shows two-way traffic, there's another space that shows two-way traffic. And there's, in one of the overhead drawings, it looks like there's a line of bushes or landscaping there. But then somehow there are vehicles being parked in that building from the east end. I don't figure that out. I really think we need to make some accommodation for her. And I know that this would be a little severe, but I think the entire development would be best served if in that building, if the two units on the west end were just chopped off. Give a little more room for separate drives and go from there. And I did, as long as I'm rattling on here, I did speak at the last meeting, and I said that we can't vote against this based on what we've seen at this location in terms of maintenance and upkeep. I'm rethinking that. I walked behind the newer unit on the southwest corner of the property this afternoon. As soon as you get on the north side of that building, it's obvious there hasn't been a mower back there probably since June, if then. And as soon as you get behind the building, one of the concerns I had for families living there is they would have a place to have a picnic or throw a frisbee or play catch or something. And that space would provide for that, but there are dead branches piled up. There's a charcoal grill that you can hardly see because it's overgrown. The weeds back there go from knee-high to shoulder-high. The fence is totally overgrown and unkempt. So I think there needs to be a pretty serious change to this plan. And I would hope when this gets approved in some form, that the maintenance and the upkeep attention is what it ought to be.
So I guess I have a question here. So today here, we're being asked to vote on the zoning. When it comes to some of the issues you bring up, I'm looking at Bill next to you, when it comes to inspections and things like that, I'm assuming you keep up with, or you will, the expectation is that you'll help keep up with some of the inspections, things that maybe Mr. Peckham is.
If I could interject before, I did bring to his attention in December a total lack of recycling facilities for the residents of all of those buildings. That was in December, and I don't think a single finger was lifted to provide any sort of remedy for that at all. And within, 6 weeks ago, the dumpster area outdoors was still strewn with garbage and not picked up. It was just a bad sight. And behind the back of the building, it's like walking into Appalachia or something. Yes, sir.
Well, thank you, Pat. In the areas he's talking about behind that far back building, we'd have to get a report from somebody. We we're only allowed to review the property from the public way. Or if a neighbor or a tenant notified us of an issue, we could come into the property.
An alderman mentioned it. Did that help?
There again, we're allowed to view the property from the public way, and if a neighbor let us come onto their property or a tenant brought a concern to us.
And I think from the zoning perspective and the plan that's before us, I mean, this building isn't really changing other than some improvements. So, I mean, the building, they're not demolishing that building or changing it significantly, so that from a pure plan perspective, is it a maintenance issue? Probably, but I guess, I don't know how we really address that in terms of a plan in front of this body.
I guess I don't expect this body to address the maintenance thing, but I'm kind of hesitating on approval of the whole thing based on the care that they've taken of the property in the past. So I would like to see some movement. Ms. Cronenwetter in her letter said that she attempted to contact them to see if they could work something out. They didn't return her phone call. So I'd like to see some communication there, because that ain't good, the way the entrance, I mean, we viewed it last time with the closing off of those other inlet, outlet things as a safety improvement, but that's going to, as she pointed out, it's going to shove everybody back to that one thing. I'm striving to find a better way to do this.
Mr.
Madam
Neal.
Mayor, thank you. Yeah, just to clarify, I want to be absolutely sure that the alleyway next to the residence is only for that back facility and not, it's closed off to being able to access the larger part of the project, and that is accessed either off of Grand Avenue or Sturgeon Eddy by a separate driveway, where you see the double arrows again. If that were the case, and traffic on the existing alley is restricted to just the smaller building, that is an improvement over what I was worried about before, because I thought it was just going to be a thoroughfare. So that is good, and I appreciate the effort on the developer's part to adjust the proposal to address parking issues and that sort of thing. I'll join Alder Peckham in my concern about management practices, which I find unacceptable, but it's not, I guess, in the purview of this committee to go after that, but I think it's in the city's interest to find a way to ensure that the property is managed and maintained up to some kind of standard. Just from the potential for vermin alone in that backyard property down to the southwest, that's unacceptable. And anything, regarding the trash receptacles overflowing or not being policed is really unacceptable. And these are the kind of things that, I just like to see a developer come forward and say, well, we've got that covered and that's not going to happen again. Sure would like to hear that at some level as this goes through the process.
Is that something that we could hear now, or do we need to wait? Okay. Sure, thank you. If you could address your name and
Yes,
address.
Nick Brock, I work for Cobley Investments, has worked for Cobley Investments for over 10 years. As of lately, ever since Mr. Peckham had brought it to our attention of the garbage, which has been a large overflow to do move-outs, I have been weekly traveling there with a tractor and trailer, removing garbage, moving the dumpster. We anticipate a lot better trash management, thank you, from not only ourselves, but our tenants that we hope to fill this facility with in the future. It's a goal of hopefully the whole community, not just us. So,
Thank you.
thank you.
Can I address that?
Sure, sure. If you could give us your, if you could give your name for the record, please.
Jennifer Blair with Share Construction. So I just want to also point out, one of the modifications we did with the plan to address the trash issue is we've taken one valuable parking space out of each building and able to put in a trash bin and a recycling bin inside the unit, so it won't be out in the open, so that tenants will be able to dispose of their garbage and trash inside the garage space of each of the 3 buildings, so that it will be out of public sight. So the plan is addressing some of those issues that were brought up.
Thank you. Hey, if you could give your name and address for the record, I'll take your comments.
My name is Mary Ann Gallagher, and my address is 316 Reuter Street. I wanted to come back to this issue over the maintenance and address, is it Mr. Rasmussen? Okay. Okay, gotcha.
It's a fake name tag tonight.
I gotcha, okay. I'm all about accountability, and if this maintenance issue was brought to you by our alderman, why was this not addressed? You need to be accountable for what transpired there.
I can speak to the one about the recycling back in December, and that was addressed at the time. Mr. Peckham was back there, 4 or 5 weeks ago, and I can't say that the recycling was there at the time, but it's obvious that they were moving out their tenants and tearing down the buildings, so
I mean, it's just hard to believe that you have this position, and yet he walks back there, and there's weeds that are shoulder high, there's garbage back there, and nothing has been done about it.
Pat brought that to my attention about 5 minutes ago.
As an inspector, that should have been on your list a long time ago, including the other
If we could
building.
keep the comments to the chair instead of other people.
Sure.
Thank you.
Sure, I understand.
Yep.
But I think that's the pinpoint of this issue, is the maintenance, because the lack of maintenance is so visible between not just this property, but also the property that's over on Thomas. And I do have to say that it's just not me, but people are looking, and I did notice in my casual travels back and forth down Thomas Avenue that, yeah, the parking lot over there, started to look better, so I could tell somebody's doing something, but that wasn't done until it was brought up. And I just think that's just shameful, and I think it's also shameful that somebody's not doing their job, and it's not just more than one person. Or it is more than one person, I should say.
If you could state your name and address for the record, please.
Whoops, sorry.
Oh,
Whoops,
there goes the windscreen.
sorry. Sally Kitzrow, Sally Kitzrow, 128 Miller Avenue. You actually spelled my name wrong. In the minutes, it's Sally with an IE instead of a Y.
Okay.
Thank you for allowing me to say something here. I wanted to address the alley concern. On the September 9th letter from Mr. Brad Sippel. It says, provide access to the parking solely from the alley, yet completely contained within the property. So on the letter that was sent, it addresses that it's only the alley. So I don't know how you can say that the alley is only going to be to the far west building when it's clearly stated here that is solely there.
Sure.
The other item I would like to have explained to me is, at the last meeting with the sale of 1414 Grand Avenue, they had increased the units to 32. Then in the, in the September 10th memo from Brad Sippel, it says now it's reduced from 29 to 25. What happened to the 32? I mean, I'm not complaining, 25 is great, but then, when I look at the first paragraph in the September 9th letter, I don't know how you're getting 29 units out of this, because it says 2 of the buildings will consist of 10, parentheses, 8 units, made up of 6 one-bedroom units, 2 two-bedroom units, and of those 4 type B ADA units. And the third building will consist of 7 one-bedroom units, 2 two-bedroom units, and 1 type A. I have not any way come up with 25 units with that description. So
I could just jump in real quick. I read that 3 times, and I had the exact same problem, but I finally figured out by looking at the drawings and stuff, there's going to be 2 buildings of 8 units and 1 of 9. So 8, 8, 9 is 25.
Okay. And then I also wanted to comment on with the alley, back to the alley, that goes off to Sturgeonetti. What are you going to consider with the stoplights on Sturgeonetti and Grand Avenue? Because that alley, I don't know the exact distance from Grand Avenue, but because I live right there, when people are either trying to get into that alley off Sturgeonetti when they turn off Grand Avenue, and people are waiting by the lights, they can't get in there, and if people are trying to get out, they can't get out. So I don't know how you're going to, what you're thinking about addressing with the stoplights for Grand Avenue and Sturgeonetti, because right now I think they're on a trip switch, because you can sit there for the lights on Town Line Road will switch 2 and 3 times before the lights on Sturgeonetti and Grand switch. And then I also would like to address the parking with those, there's no parking in that area on Sturgeonetti. Obviously, there's no parking on Grand Avenue. There's one-sided parking on Fairmont and Miller. So I would like to know how that parking is going to be addressed. And then with the plans, as I look through the plans, I know last time they had talked about possibly having elderly, but I do not believe that there's an elevator in any of the units for elderly. So if you are going to target families with children, I saw no place in the plan that would allow for children playing. And I am wondering, kind of with the fence idea, if there's going to be a fence provided around the area to provide privacy to the homeowners that live on that block that abut all of those places, to assure that the homeowners aren't affected with the building of the whole unit. And as far as Mr. Peckham, the far west building, last time I had made a comment that there's garbage. People that live in a second story on the west building that is probably not going to have much done to it, they take the screens off the windows and they literally dump garbage out of the windows into the yard. And behind the building, my next door neighbor butts up right against that, and he's not here tonight, but he said that he has called and complained. And I've been told you can call the police at any time and make a complaint, but then you get targeted because you're calling the police all the time. So, thank you for listening.
Mr. Peckham?
Yeah, I can just, personal testimony from this afternoon. I did look for that garbage that is reportedly being thrown out the window, and I found one plastic plate and one plastic water bottle. So I'm assuming that somebody was back there and did some cleanup, and maybe somebody tossed a couple of other things. But right now, it's not bad. The little Appalachia part comes from a little further from the building.
Mr. Sippel, do you have any thoughts on the alley? Maybe you could.
Yeah, I can clarify that. So the plan that's in the packet and the plan that was submitted as of writing that memo had all of the access off of the alley. The discussions since that letter came in have been on creating basically extending this driveway that leads to the garages. We've been talking with the developer on whether this would be possible or not, extending the driveway that leads to the garages all the way to the street to provide a second access point on Sturgeon. So just to clarify that, when that was written and the plans in the packet show the single entrance off of the alley. And then I think I was going to clarify something on the parking as well. The current plan, as it sits in front of you, meets the normal parking requirements in the ordinance. So I guess that, and then there was a fence, question about the fence too. And on the current plans, there is a 6-foot-high solid wood fence on the south property line of where the new buildings would go. The property that has the renovated building is not showing a fence on the plans. So that's just to answer that question on what's provided in the plans that are in front of everyone today.
Thank you, Mr. Neal.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just to clarify then, on the existing alley, right there, as we go to the south, past what looks like some landscaping or whatever, there's an apparent gap. Is that providing access in this plan to the larger buildings, or is that intended to be closed off?
I think, well, I'll try to answer that. I think I have the answer, but correct me if I'm wrong. I believe that would have to remain there to provide the turning radius for emergency vehicle access onto the property. I think if that were closed off, that they wouldn't be able to meet the radius requirements of the emergency vehicles.
I see nodding there, yeah.
I'm not understanding that. I mean, there's a whole turnaround on the smaller building, so it seems to be a lot of access for any emergency vehicles there. And in the larger facilities parking area, you say there's not enough radius in there for emergency without a gap?
I don't know if the developer could comment on that, but I think just coming around the building, if they were entering in from the driveway rather than the alley, coming around the building.
So per the fire department inspector request, the largest fire vehicle needs to have a 40-foot turning radius to maneuver. So the way the plan is set up is there's a access point off of Grand Avenue that is for emergency vehicles only, and that's not going to be paved. It's just going to have landscape blocks underneath to provide a solid surface. So an emergency vehicle can come in off of Grand Avenue. Then in order to access the rest of the buildings, they would need access to the alley to make that turn to exit the site. So we would still need to have that gap, that space in between. When the plan was developed, we were trying to minimize access points onto both Grand Avenue and Sturgeon Eddy per the ordinances, per the codes. In the code, if you can provide access other than on Grand Avenue, then we don't get an access on Grand Avenue. And so with the alley, instead of trying to have too many driveways all along Sturgeon Eddy close to the intersection, since that was a public alley, it was deemed best to come off of the alley to enter onto the site to minimize the number of access points onto the road. If that's changed, the developer, we're amenable to extending our driveway onto Sturgeon Eddy. And I have my civil engineer here with me tonight, too. There is a little bit of concern with those two drives being so close to each other that it could pose some hazardous conditions. If somebody's coming out the alley and somebody's coming out the drive aisle, those cars are quite close trying to make the same turn or crossing traffic. That was why we minimized to the alley access to make it a safer condition. Again, we're amenable to recommendations extending our driveway, but we still then have two access points fairly close to each other. Any other access point off of Sturgeon Eddy onto the site is going to get that closer to the intersection, which is also going to pose more hazard. So something for consideration, but again, we're open to recommendations.
I thought of something as we were talking about this. Do you think it'd be feasible maybe to use the same grassy paver type thing where the opening is to allow emergency vehicle access but discourage?
I don't have an issue with that. The gap, that we're leaving for the fire truck to turn at the lower, kind of the south corner. So we have the 5-foot gap between the alley and our drive, and then there's a space to drive through. I think he's saying in there, just fill that. That's okay. This gap in here, from here to here, but the same blocks.
Yeah, if we've had access off of Grand for the other buildings. Right now. Or keep the access on Sturgeon.
We would keep what is our drive aisle, connect that to Sturgeon Eddy, and that would be the only ingress, egress to our site. And then we would just leave the block pavers south of that planting bed there. That would become the permeable, the pavers to drive across.
I don't have a problem with that, I still think it's a big concern to have two accesses so close to each other.
I'm sorry, I can't.
Oh, sorry. The pavers between, to keep that emergency radius, I wouldn't have a concern with that, just to put it in the landscaped area, or make it landscaped with pavers. The only issue I still have is that those two accesses would be so close to each other, and that makes for more vehicle incidences when you have two separated so close to each other.
Yes, Mr. Neal.
Can I throw a wild one out there?
Why not?
I mean, what the heck? Now, there's not a clear illustration or view here of the neighboring house and how they use that alley and how far back on that alley they need, that might be handy. Where does that, so they turn off of the alley there to the south? To like a, is that, oh, it must be their garage there, right?
Garage is
Okay.
back in, yeah,
Okay.
they use part of the alley. It looks like they have part of a driveway on their own property, but mostly
Sure.
use the alley.
What I'm suggesting is look at the potential of vacating that alley all the way to their garage access, ceding some of the alleys, current alleys' width from the city to the developer to make a wider drive, and it would be a single drive that, would service all three buildings. And also probably provide the required turning radius that we've been discussing. It seems to me then that, the only downside might be that the resident would think, oh my gosh, now I have to take care of all that snow removal on that long driveway. But it would be their driveway if they were amenable to that as a solution. Because it seems like there's ample footprint here to do that, to just, we take out some width from that existing alley to make it more of a driveway width to service the house alone. Then we widen the proposed new driveway off of Sturgeon Eddy, and then down towards where the garage is there, there's a gap to access the third building at the south. Any merit to this idea?
I think it's a creative idea. I think an issue our surveyor would have to check, if we do vacate that alley, it may not necessarily be split down the middle. I mean, it may go to one property owner or the other, so there'd have to be some negotiation on that, I think.
There's another additional issue. On the south end, behind 1414, there's an additional 24-foot wide easement that is access to his property. So even though it doesn't show that the alley comes all the way through, there is a dedicated easement from Sturgeon Eddy all the way down to the property line of 1414 and 1412. So there would have to be some concession or something with the owner of 1414. Our developers already had conversations with him about vacating that easement, and he did not seem receptive to that.
I thought at our last meeting that there was talk of acquiring 1414.
He changed his mind after we had the meeting and has rescinded his offer. So we are not being able to purchase 1414.
Yes, Mr. Peckham.
Yeah, however this gets sliced up, I'm wondering who's going to be responsible for plowing the snow, because that's already a problem, especially if the drive were split and the westerly entrance was only for the homeowner and what's going to become a fourplex, especially that one, who would plow that out? It's a public alleyway at this time, serving, an apartment. So who plows it?
Warrant now.
They do.
Nick Brock with Colby Investments. We've been plowing that alleyway for the last however long we've owned it, with the assumption that it was ours. So we've maintained it, we've fixed potholes and stuff in it, just under the assumption that it was to be maintained by Colby Investments.
You would continue to do that?
Yes, because it would give access to our residents and essentially take a headache away from us with phone calls, so.
But we generally don't plow at public alleys, right? I mean, there's maybe one case that we do on 3rd Street, but otherwise it's kind of like a driveway that the property owner maintains it, even though it's public.
We do have the benefit of having an engineer on this body, and I'm wondering if the engineer could share an opinion on the access issues that we're wrestling with here.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good point as far as having two accesses close together. Based on that, we did try to have some conversation about what the distance was we could separate those accesses. I mean, these are basically, it's not a through alley, so it's like having two driveways next to each other, really, although we have some a little bit higher density housing. So there are additional conflicts when you do that, but it does allow for the separation, for the two properties to have their own access, yeah.
Can I ask one more question? Would there be any consideration to also alleviate some traffic where we have the emergency access off of Grand Avenue? Would there be any potential or possibility to make that an exit only from our property, turning right? No left turn into that property, and then the only entrance onto it be coming off of Grand Avenue, taking a right turn in?
Yeah, I'd have to look, I mean, in our ordinance, there's actually access restrictions, because it is a, it's a state highway, so I'd have to look. We are trying to eliminate some of those accesses onto Grand Avenue, which is, because there are a lot of conflicts, and that is close to, Grand Avenue gets about 30,000 vehicles a day, so that is close to those lights, so we'd prefer to have it closed off like you have it right now, and find another solution for people to come in and out, yeah.
Okay, it just was another way to try and alleviate.
Nope,
The-
I understand, yep. I mean, we at engineering, we're willing to take a look at it and see
Okay.
what those access agreements and stuff are, and stuff with the
Yeah.
DOT. so.
And I think our developer, I think when we first set this up, I think he was preferable to having the Grand Avenue exit closed off as well, but we just want to make sure that we can make this happen.
Sure, yep.
I guess I'd just like to chime in. I did a quick measurement. I mean, the distance from the alley now to the intersection is about 172 feet, which I think is a decent distance. I mean, maybe it stacks up on occasion there if someone's not in the proper place for for the trigger, for the sensor to go off, for the lights, but, I mean, that's a pretty big stacking distance, I think, most of the time.
It is, and Sturgeon Eddy, I mean, they're older style lights, but there won't be any changes to the timing and stuff on those lights, just because Grand Avenue is, the primary route, and it has such a heavy volume of traffic, so, just to answer that question that came up earlier.
Okay.
Steve Gallagher, 316 Rooter. On those two driveways, what if you made one incoming, make them both one way, one out, one in? That way people coming onto Sturgeon Eddy could turn left into the one driveway, and people wanting to turn right on Sturgeon Eddy, it would actually make the flow better. And you wouldn't have so much conflict of cars coming out both driveways.
I mean, for me personally, I'm open to any and all ideas for however they want to
Seems like
do
it
it.
would help
I mean, we
flow the traffic better.
could make it a one-way alley and coming in and one-way going out. Either
Yeah.
way, we were willing to look at it either way.
Yeah, I
so.
think coming out of the garages, though, are they backing out? There needs to be some space there I think some of this is because of the,
But even if you left that as about as wide as it is, just made it out only.
just for the traffic flow?
Yeah, that way on the right driveway, if you want to turn right on Sturgeon Eddy, you get right out. People trying to come in from Sturgeon Eddy and turning left to come in would go in the second driveway. It would actually make your flow better to me.
I mean, so you can only take a right from here? I mean,
Correct, yeah.
what if you wanted to go left on Sturgeon?
Well, you could almost make it left or right on the going out, but coming in, it would give people better access with less traffic turning left into the complex.
Then you still have to accommodate this house and this
And they could do
building
the
back
same
there.
thing. They could come in and go out the same two driveways. I don't think they'd have an argument against that.
I think they
Just
would
an
just
idea.
have to present it and show the traffic flow and make sure it would work with their
Just another
development.
idea.
Right, yep.
One other item. So you're saying that if there's weeds behind that other building, someone has to complain before you can go back there and look. Is that my understanding?
All I'm saying, we're glad to take a look at anything that comes to our attention. All I'm saying is that from our attorney's perspective, we cannot, as inspectors, walk onto private property without being welcomed.
So if
Either
we
by
had
a
an
tenant or a
agreement from the
neighbor.
developer that you can go back there because of the problems we've had in the past, would that work?
Sure, yeah, I mean, and we've, I don't want to, we are,
I would
if we
say
get a
that's what
complaint,
you need to
we
do.
follow through on it. We do
Okay.
not forget about it. We have a system that has checks and balances to that.
Mm-hmm.
Everything is, approved at some point. It's not to say that 2 months later down the road, something, they didn't do it again, or didn't mow the lawn or whatever it may be.
Well, as a resident over there, I don't want to turn into a policeman for property. That's what kind of irks our whole neighborhood. Do we have to watch this developer all the time to see that he's doing things right? At what point is it's just taking advantage of the system?
Yeah, I mean, we have, I can talk to you after the meeting too, but we have other, we have we have a registration requirement for all rentals. We have a chronic nuisance ordinance as well. So if there's so many complaints within a time period, we can
So
deem it a
that means
chronic
we have to
nuisance.
keep going and complaining.
No, well, we just call them
Well,
generally
that's what it
complaints.
boils down to.
Well, we call them, we refer to them as complaints, but over almost 80% of them are initiated by the inspectors. It's just a
Okay.
reference.
Okay.
Okay, if you could state your name.
Hi, my name's Claire Brooks. I live at 120 Miller Avenue. My husband is here with me tonight, and it's actually the property that is directly south of the existing building that will be renovated. So we back up right next to where their parking lot is and the existing apartment building there. So as you can imagine, we're pretty concerned about all these changes, what's going to happen to our property value, our privacy. And I wanted to acknowledge, I understand that the parking ratio 1.48 is being acted upon, but I think I speak for a lot of our neighbors when I say that we are concerned about what will happen when that ratio gets surpassed, when people have more cars than are able to fit in those lots. Miller Avenue is a really narrow street, and we already have on average of 2 to 5 cars parked on the street overnight. And I know we have alternate side parking to kind of help with some of those issues, but I think I speak for a lot of people when I say that we are concerned about snow removal, garbage removal, bringing our own property in and out of our driveways, that already can kind of be cumbersome with the amount of cars that are currently parked on the street without even having taken into account for the possible more cars that would come from this development. So I recognize that we've already hit the 1.4 recommended ratio, but that is something that we wanted to bring light to, that it's still a concern of ours. And then along with that, my husband and I being right on that back side of the property, there is a fence there currently. I believe it's our property fence, and so we feel very strongly that that is maintained, and that back property line, the trees be kept care of, any of the dead brush like we'd already been talking about, figuring out that, but maintaining our privacy with that fence, and then the upkeep, maybe addition of trees that need to be taken down, just so we can continue keeping our property what we know and love.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yes, Mr. Deal.
Thanks again, Madam Mayor. Well, with years of experience here in economic development proposals, I've seen so many instances where, once an idea gets down on paper or on computer, in the form of a blueprint, a footprint, and then renderings and whatnot, it's almost like at committee level, when discussions are happening, it's like, oh gee, we can't touch this. I mean, look, there it is. This is what we've got, So I'm really happy tonight to see that, comments from our last meeting have been addressed, and there's a willingness to change as a result. I don't know that we as a committee tonight are in a position to approve this, given, if we had to vote on it, I don't know where that would fall, because I think there's some issues outstanding that we need to see resolved with regards to that ingress and egress and consideration for the adjacent neighbor. I'm really concerned that alleyway would be used as a thoroughfare for all. I just don't think that is an acceptable solution from my standpoint. And I think that we need to maybe look at some minor alterations to this to accommodate the traffic for all three facilities, or all the facilities rather, without burdening unfairly that neighbor. So I don't know what needs to happen in terms of discussions between staff and the developer, but I'm really not comfortable to vote for this. And I do welcome this development, this proposal. I like it. On the big picture, scheme, I like it a lot. But I'm concerned about these details, and I'm really not comfortable voting on it if they're left hanging.
So here's my question, obviously, my first term here on this committee. We're voting on the zoning, and I'm curious at what point are we kind of overstepping what we should be doing? But also, we want to obviously work with the developer and the neighbors and all of that, so maybe shed a little light on this.
Okay, well, I mean, being that it is a planned unit development, I mean, we do have site plan control and review and approval, so, I mean, some of the details that we're talking about, you know, to Tom's point, they're not exactly on the plans as we've discussed. You know, if they need to be, we can come back in the future with the plan. You know, we could ask the designers to make those suggested changes between now and council. That would be an option as well, but, I mean, yeah, we can. These are, I guess, most of the comments, I think, are fair game from a site design perspective. And, you know, the maintenance stuff is a little harder to address through zoning. But in terms of site design, I think they are legitimate
If I
concerns, I
might
guess.
add, then, just to your point, Brad, is that I can just guarantee if this, you know, goes forward to council in this form, that we'll have this discussion again. We'll have
Right.
neighbors again, and we will still be addressing the same issues about ingress and egress and concerns about the neighbor. That will happen again.
Right,
So
I guess-
our option is either to deal with it here or try to maybe, you know, have the developer go back and come back to us with something that addresses that, or kind of just, you know, roll the dice and let that get hashed out later at the council level. I'd kind of like to bring council something that's been pre-vetted and, you know, debugged and more ready, you know, more palatable for passing.
Right. I guess, you know, to the developer's credit, they have been very responsive to changes that we have suggested. And, I mean, we could check with them. It may be possible that they could actually change the site plan to the discussion that we've been having here between now and council. So instead of having to come back here and then go to council, I mean, an option could be to send it to council in verbal, you know, with the verbal conditions that these things are changed, and I believe they would be able to make those changes between now and the
I
final
believe I could
approval.
support that.
Does the developer, is there anything
When is council?
next Tuesday, 1 week?
So you need these changes done by when?
I mean, Tuesday for sure, that'd be the latest, to get into the packet. I mean, we could update it.
I think,
And we're looking, I'm sorry.
Tuesday, I think.
So the changes you're looking for is extending our drive out to Sturgeon Eddy. Is there more research that needs to be done engineering-wise to the feasibility of that, or is that?
I think you'd have to show that it's going to work, you know, like, you know, there's some comments about, you know, the alley, there was a vacation comment, you know, which sounds like it's off the table. There was making it one way in and one way out on using that as, so I think that you'd have to take a look at that. Is it going to work with your development on the garages and everything that's there? Or what would be best, you know, on the development to try to accommodate some of the comments that are made and still have the ingress and egress?
I think maybe, I mean, the normal timeline, we can possibly move things from here to the next council in a week. The normal timeline would be the following council meeting, which would be the 2nd in October. So, I mean, rather than try to rush things in a couple days here, maybe if that timeline is
Yeah,
maybe
and
better for everyone, if we do take a couple more weeks to try to.
not to give it all away, but I'm probably going to be asking for a special plan commission meeting coming up here on the next item, so that could also be a possibility. Yeah, Mr. Peckham, I saw you had your hand.
Yeah, I would be interested in moving to, depending on whether there are other issues that people want to address, and I haven't heard them so far, but I would move that we approve this with the proviso that the developers meet with the adjoining homeowner and discuss some of the ideas that have been brought out here, in terms of that access, including the possibility of having the westerly portion of that drive be in only, have one lane in, and then have everybody go out the other one, and then people who live in the 3 new buildings would all use the driveway on the east side. They would have no reason to go in the other side, because that would only feed the existing building and the home.
That is one heck of a motion, sir.
Dang, Pat.
So I guess,
Want me to make it a little more concise?
I guess I would ask for clarification. Is your motion to approve the plan with the understanding that the developers will meet with the adjoining homeowner to discuss access and drive options and come back to us with that recommendation?
It could go right to the council, I think.
Okay,
I don't want to, I'm trying to be sensitive to the fact that you probably want to start building.
Yeah, definitely, yes.
You're not going to sit and wait until May, right?
No, we're,
Okay, so I'm trying to
we've
be
got
sensitive to that.
plans into state review, and we're, as soon as we get all of our approvals, we're ready to,
Okay, so I would
Start.
move to forward this to council,
on October 2nd? Was that the date you're looking at?
yes.
Okay.
It would be the
On October
October
2nd.
13th.
first one in October, give them,
Okay.
give you 3 weeks.
Okay, so
right?
the motion is to approve the plan and have the developers meet with the adjoining homeowner to discuss access and drive options and come back to our October 13th meeting,
And don't
council
come to
meeting
the
with a
council
recommendation.
with this plan, because it's going to get shot down.
Okay, so I have a motion. Do I have a second? Second by Neil. All right, we are in the discussion portion again. Is there any more discuss? Andrew, you're going to have to yell out if you have anything you want to say. I can't see you, so.
I just want to make sure that Alderperson Peckham was not referencing that it's just options, and we have to come up with a better plan for ingress and egress for the property, not necessarily a preferred option in a left turn in, right turn out, single way, because you're making constrictions that we don't necessarily know if those are even options for the actual adjoining property owner. So they're coming back with options
Sure.
of something that works, not a specific.
I'm seeing heads
plan
nodding around
that we
here.
Identified.
Yeah, I think they would be amenable to a conversation, and I think something workable can come out of that meeting between the developer and the homeowner.
I saw someone in the audience kind of leap up and want to talk, so I guess I'll give you the opportunity. If you give your name and address for the record, please.
Kevin Mulliver, I own 110 Miller and 1500 Grand Avenue.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree with Mr. Neal. If you allow the access from Grand Avenue as a fire only, that'll never work. Tenants are never going to listen to that. They're just going to exit onto Grand there anyway. You said before they already addressed the number of units to accommodate the parking 1.48 to the number of units. I just know from example myself, plowing snow, I lose probably about a third of my parking spots in the winter. And I do get fined from the city when I plow snow into the street, but anyway. But there it's, and for traffic wise, the only concern I guess I would have is there's traffic that is flowing over onto Miller, onto my area. Just like today, when I was sitting with one of my carriers in my meeting, in my 1 hour meeting, I had like 4 people zip through in my parking lot. It's just, and plus even in winter, I always have the vagrant vehicles, in the parking that always screws up the plowing. So those would only be my concerns, but if they address the parking spot, but otherwise, I would agree with Tom once again, the access on the Grand, if they are able to come. You could also look at, for the alley, instead of allowing the homeowner, if it's normally 12 feet, I think the normal thing is one gets 6 and the other gets 6. If you can just, I think the city has the authority to make a, try to get the other 6, then if you give them the other 6 feet and then just allow them to put up the fence there, that would then be accommodation where they're getting land and then having to maintain the fence, something like that. Mr. Bill, I know you want to say something? No? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Is there any discussion from this body? Are you prepared to vote? Okay, it looks like we're prepared to vote. Now, just as a reminder, we're motioning to approve the plan, and we're expecting the developers to meet with the adjoining homeowner to discuss access and drive options, and come back to our city council meeting on October 13th with recommendation. All those in favor can signify by saying aye.
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 Are there any opposed? All right, that passes unanimously. Thank you. And if you thought this was over, it's not. We had an addendum. So our addendum is, we have a homeless initiative that we're working with the police department on, and I'm hoping that Police Chief Ben Blevin would give us a little update on where we're at and why we're talking to you, Plan Commission, about this. Thank you for sticking with us.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to be here and talk to you guys about what we've got going on. It's we've had a lot of discussions at the city council level and within city government and all of our partners in the nonprofit sector around homelessness and issues that our communities are experiencing. And so I'm here to tell you that the problem isn't better today than it was a year ago. It was about a year ago we started talking about the loitering ordinance within the parking ramps. We started a task force with a lot of community leaders that has now been passed on to the United Way. The United Way is really taking the beginning steps with those initiatives to really put some structure in place to really make some impact around homelessness, but there's still a lot of work to be done on those initiatives. And so as the problem is getting worse, evidenced by a lot more calls for service down on our Riverwalk area, both on the east side of the river and on the west side of the river. We had a person who regularly slept underneath the bridge who fell into the river and drowned recently. You know, there are more and more issues that are growing as a result of the homelessness in our downtown area. So in discussions with our partners at North Central Healthcare, we're talking about starting a program it's an evidence-based program called Assertive Community Treatment. And so that program is really designed to work out of a home or a place where people who have high-intensity AODA and or mental health issues can receive service, where they can stay and receive service. And so as we're working through the various aspects of this and trying to get it up and running as a pilot program very quickly, you know, it was brought to our attention that if we are working to resolve this issue and implement this program, we need a house. We need a place where they can be. It doesn't have to be a house. It could be an empty business, a vacant business, a location, someplace where people can lay their head if they accept our assistance into this assertive community treatment program. And so the housing component is really critical to that because we need a place for them to be. They can't be in this program and be sleeping outside in the parks or underneath a bridge. And so the reason that we're here today is to tell you about that program and to say that I'm not a zoning expert, an inspections expert by any stretch of the imagination. I am probably not even considered a layperson in that. I just don't know that much about it. But I know that we will have, our plan is to have a house, maybe two places, somewhere in the downtown area. We have our eyes on some places. We've had some meetings with a landlord about places that we can use. And the plan is to have a couple of places where we can have between 6 and 8 people per residence in this program. So up to probably 14 people, which may be on the high end. We're unsure at this point if it's going to be single occupancy in each room or double occupancy in each room. We haven't reached that decision-making point yet. The idea is to have the tenant, the person that signs the lease will be North Central Healthcare. They will be responsible for the payment and for maintaining that location. And they will then provide case management. They will provide AODA and or mental health treatment as it's necessary for the individuals that are residing there. And so that's kind of the concept. We will have a police officer that's assigned to this team They will be stopping in many times a week to talk to and work with the individuals that are staying at this home. So that's kind of the overarching description, 30,000-foot view of what this program would look like. We know that there are zoning ordinances that may be an issue for us creating that program, implementing it quickly. And so we've been in contact with Bill, and Bill's helped us understand what some of those issues are. And so I'm not asking for anything today, I'm just giving you information. The mayor indicated a potential special session, maybe within a couple of weeks or so that we could come to you with a more firm plan of what we are trying to do, where this is going to be, and we can ask for your approval to allow us to work and do this group home work for this population that desperately needs it. Another issue that I think that it's important for you to know that that our Catholic Charities is working on the warming center that usually opens November 1st. They are working on a location to actually have the warming center this year. They can't be in their facility on 3rd Avenue because of COVID. Last year, before they closed, they went to Marathon Park at the youth building, and then they also went across the street to the YWCA. Neither of those places are available to them this year. And so a program like we're talking about should reduce the burden on the warming center because we will have a place for people to be staying. And so hopefully, if a plan like this was approved, we would be able to lessen the burden that Catholic Charities has and maybe open up some possibilities for them in terms of how many beds they have to be able to provide for this population. So that's the plan. We're trying to move very quickly because winter's approaching. We know that the problem is growing, and we don't want to sit idle any longer. We want to take action. So I appreciate the opportunity to be here. That's the basis, the information that I have. Hopefully we can be back in a few weeks to ask for your approval on a more specific plan, but I'm happy to answer questions if I can.
Thank you so much. Yes, I saw Alder Neal has his hand up already.
Thanks. Welcome, Chief.
Thank you, sir.
Based on our, knowledge that, our homeless population tends to be centrally located in the business district, are we focusing on somewhere within the downtown area as a priority? And secondly, is this sort of like a walk-in type service or something more like you sign up for and are basically a resident?
Yeah, you'll basically be a resident. So the idea is to do intensive community outreach. We don't have any legal authority to require people to participate in this program, so it will be consensual and voluntary. We've identified 21 people who we've had very regular contact with over the course of this spring and summer in the downtown area. North Central Healthcare has cross-referenced that list. They're aware and have worked with at least half of those individuals. And what I think is interesting is the individual that drowned in the river wasn't on that list. So we know the problem's bigger than what we think it is. So it will be a voluntary program. It will be a residential program where they will stay in the home as long as they're receiving services and working to fix that issue. Our thought is that it'll be a 60 to 90-day trial to see if anybody's willing to accept our assistance. I think we know that there will be people that will be interested in working with North Central Healthcare. We just don't know to what extent. We've already talked with a couple of foundations who are very interested in helping to provide support for standing this program up in a long-term capacity beyond the 60 or 90-day pilot period. So we've done a lot of legwork. And I think you had another question that I didn't answer yet.
About the central location as a priority, or is there some element of transportation involved if it were more remote?
Yeah, I mean, so the focus for us will be trying to recruit and talk to and case manage individuals who are in the downtown area. That will be our focus. In terms of where they have to go, they're going to get that counseling, that treatment at that location. Largely, if they have to go somewhere, I mean, they may have to go to a facility like North Central Healthcare or something like that. But they will have case managers involved that will help facilitate whatever transportation needs exist.
Thank you. Any other questions from this body?
Well, how long do you think the length of stay will be, Ben?
I have no idea. I don't know. I think, when you talk about, some of these programs, it's different, but somewhat similar to what Catholic Charities does with Beyond Shelter. There is no determined timeline for how long people can stay in the Beyond Shelter program. We will have, expectations in the home about following treatment plans and trying to work through the issues and the problems that they're experiencing. But I don't think that there will be a timeline set for people. We have talked about trying to have a tiered approach, which means, an approach where, people can come into, one of these homes that I just described, and then once they're ready to step out of that environment, go over to the Hope House that's run by North Central Healthcare, and potentially then step out into a house on their own. So, I don't know what the answer to that is. I don't think anybody will be able to give you a firm answer on that, because I just don't know what that will be. It'll be different for every person.
Is there any other discussion? Thank you so much. This is so important, and I'm super pumped that you've taken on the urgency of this, so thank you.
Yeah, it is an extremely urgent need and something that we have to take action on, so appreciate the opportunity to be here and talk about it.
Thank you. And I guess for the rest of this body, we might be having a special plan commission meeting if we have a home that we can actually close in on, so be ready for that. Check your email, and thanks for being a part of this body. It's super important work. All right, the next item on our agenda, I guess I skipped our planning, news, and education. Thanks to Brad Sippel for giving us an article on mapping the effects of parking minimum. I don't know if you had any comments on that.
I guess I don't want to take up any more time, but if you haven't looked at it yet, it's a really interesting look at the property tax value and how parking affects basically the productivity of land use. And it looks at a couple specific communities, but it applies pretty much everywhere. So,
Thank you for keeping us up on our planning education. Our next meeting is scheduled for October 20th, but you might be in here a little bit sooner than that. I would take a motion to adjourn. Motion by Neal, second by Peckham. All in favor? Thank you. I'll see you next time. Thanks for participating.